I think we live in an ecosystem where your card becomes your identity. All of a sudden, you are a managing director and a CEO of a large insurance company. Everyone wants your time, and then one fine day, you don't have a card.
Mr. Amit Malik is a dynamic executive and board leader.
Amit is currently the CEO and the country head for one of the technology companies.
Talent for inspiring innovation. Mr. Amit Malik's personal leadership mantra is leadership is a choice, not a position.
I started to ask why before why became fashionable. To be successful, you just don't need knowledge or you just don't need skills. You also need to be relevant.
When I was struggling to find my feet in the world, you were kind enough to give me time to have a cup of coffee with you. This trait of being curious, I think it's a panacea to build connection.
So when you meet people, it's important to understand their story. Each one of us has a story. If I read about Bill Gates or I read about Albert Einstein, when I meet Gaurav, why will I not use the opportunity to learn from Gaurav's journey?
Today if you look back at younger Amit, what would you talk about him?
I think over age I've wizened and like this I've realized which battles to pick up, which to let go. And I think parenting does that to you a lot. I started to understand the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. When you're aggressive, you only think of yourself, you don't think of the ecosystem.
You make sure that you invest time on your health. You make sure that you make time for your relationships. How have you been able to bring this kind of focus in your life?
I'm very miser with my time. So I need to be very clear what I'm going to spend it on. So I had a coach, and actually she helped me see this side of me that I needed to. I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it enough. What I call it personally is seamless compartmentalization.
Seamless compartmentalization. What do you mean by creating inclusive growth culture? And how does one do that?
Look at the journey there. Then you have Gen X, then you have Gen Y, then you have Gen Z. Right? The role that the organization plays is to assimilate. See, it's like saying the differences exist, but how do we make that as a strength? Right from Cha-Cha-Cha of the 60s to the Swifties. Everything is played and everyone grooves on it.
Welcome to the podcast, The X Monks Drive. I'm your host, Gaurav Arora. And today I'm going to bring to you someone who's very dear to me. Who's like a dear friend, an elder brother, and somebody who's been on this show on a couple of occasions in the past as well. I remember there was a time when Amit was in transition. He left his last job as the CEO of Aviva, and he was on a sabbatical while he was looking for new opportunities to come his way. And what happened during that transition is something which is revealing. Amit is currently the CEO and the country head for one of the technology companies, an avid reader, and somebody who makes time for things he believes are really important. Hey Amit, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you again on this show, X Monks Drive. This is the second time you are here.
Yes, thank you Gaurav for having me. I must have done something good in my last one for you to call me again, so I'm very happy.
Yes. I must tell you, all those people who are listening to us for the first time, they should really revisit the first conversation that we had. That went viral because when you said that the day you did not have the business card with you, the world changed for you. Tell us about that story one more time for the benefit of the people who might be listening it for the first time.
Well, I don't remember how I told it the last time, but maybe I'll give it a shot again this time. No, I think it happened. All of a sudden you are a managing director and a CEO of a large insurance company. There's a lot of brand that goes around you. Everyone wants your time, and then one fine day you don't have a card. So when you announce that you are moving from one job, everyone expects you to announce that you're moving from one job to the other. Right, but what I did was I said, I'm taking a break. And then there were some commitments that I had made. So I wrote to everybody before I left the office saying, I'm leaving office and so, and we made a commitment. So if you still want me to honor it, I'd be very happy to honor it.
And what kind of commitments were those?
There were speaking engagements. They were, being part of a conference, an event, right, an evening event, or write an article, all of those. So I just thought, it's best to write them. And 50% of them silently backtracked, saying, we don't want you because you're no more the MD and the CEO. So they politely asked.
They did not want you. They wanted the MD of the CEO of an insurance company.
So they politely asked me saying, so what's the next move? And I said, well, I'm taking a break and not in a position to share what I will do, right? So they politely backed off. But some, were kind enough to say, no, we want you as a person. And that's what they said. And when I went there and, you would meet people and everyone would want to come and say hello. And some know you from LinkedIn, some know you from your social media, some otherwise also, if they don't know, you would come and introduce. And the moment you said, hi, I'm Amit. And they said, oh, so where do you work for? Where do you work? And I'd say, nowhere. And, I'm on a break. It would become very awkward. There would be an awkward pause because that individual, rightfully so, has come with an agenda and an objective that he or she has to achieve in that conference, right? And I don't meet that objective parameter or, so it was very awkward, Or someone would say, can I have your card? And I'd say, well, I'm not carrying one, I'm on a break. And so that would be very awkward. So half the time I would tell them, it doesn't matter, why don't you go focus on someone else? Or why don't you go talk to, I'll get myself a glass of water? Or I just kind of move away from the conversation so that it isn't awkward for the other person, because the other person I thought would always be awkward. So I realized this, that, we all, I used to say this before, now I don't. You have to be bigger than your card, or let your card not be your identity. But I think we live in an ecosystem where your card becomes your identity. And even if you are okay with it not being your identity, the world doesn't know how to accept you.
Isn't it ironical that on one hand we say that human beings, they are wired for connection, and under threat they get rewired for protection? And here's a scenario: if somebody is not carrying the business card, we find it difficult to even start a conversation, and we find it ourselves in the awkward position. Amit, I've always found you extremely curious. Every time when you meet somebody, you'll have a very genuine conversation. You will ask them where they're from, what they do, how are they doing? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your interest. When I was struggling to find my feet in the world, you were kind enough to give me time to have a cup of coffee with you. I mean, this trait of being curious, I think it's a panacea to build connection or to do something and to continue to move in their lives. Where did you pick up this trait for yourself?
See, the curiosity came from this whole feeling that, to be successful, you just don't need knowledge or you just don't need skills. You also need to be relevant. So the knowledge has to be relevant, the skills have to be relevant. And, and you have to keep updating yourself. So this whole fear of that I will become irrelevant, was where the curiosity started. Quest for knowledge started way back when I was younger. My father was in armed forces and we used to be in small cantonments where, you could only do as much, and I was always an avid reader. So that quest for knowledge started there because you didn't have Google, you didn't have anything. So whatever you could read made the world larger for you, right? Otherwise your world would have been that military or an army cantonment or a BSF cantonment, and those 1,000 people living there. And I always wanted that, world for bigger. So that's where the quest for knowledge started, right? I don't know, not many people know I was an avid quizzer. I'm a university rank gold medal holder in quizzing. So that's where knowledge started. On the third part that you said about knowing people, I think it's, when you meet people, it's important to understand their story. Each one of us has a story. We have a journey, and that journey is a story. When you meet somebody, you have to give them the opportunity to share their story, their journey, and it teaches you a lot. You can learn from other people's journey, right? If I read about Bill Gates, or I read about Albert Einstein, or I read about Elon Musk in the book, when I meet Gaurav, why will I not use the opportunity to learn from Gaurav's journey? It's the same, right? Gaurav may not be Elon Musk today, but he has a journey and he has a story.
I love it when you said he might not be Elon Musk today.
Yeah. But you have your journey and you have your story. And when I meet you, I learn from your story and your journey.
Yeah.
And also that gives me an insight of you as an individual.
What if we can bring this gift to humanity, to everyone that we come across? And yet, if you look at small children, they are genuinely very curious. They don't get stuck. Right? They will not look at any object as a hurdle, whereas we will look at things, we look at people as hurdles. The shift, or what you're talking about right now, this is something that you would have inculcated in your journey. Today, if you look back at younger Amit, what would you talk about him? How was he?
Younger Amit was very, it's very strange. We are so similar and yet so different today. I grew up in an ecosystem, just like I shared, where, no one told you the difference between confidence and overconfidence or underconfident.
Okay, and what could be another word?
Yeah. How do you be aggressive? How do you be confident? How do you be assertive? You would not, it'll surprise many of your listeners. It very late in life, I started to understand the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Right. And
So were you assertive or aggressive?
I've always been assertive, but when you have youth,
I
and
just
you have
loved
warm
it.
blood.
The way you said I was. There was something there.
Yeah, no. So and I answered that question. Like I said, I've always been assertive, but when you are young and you have that blood, you tend to be a lot more aggressive at that time. Also, see, remember, I grew up in an India where you were told that you have to go out and get things for yourself. No one is going to give it to you on a platter. Right. So you had to have that drive. Now, whether you call that drive aggression or whether you call that drive to achieve something, it could be either. It could be depending on how people experienced me at that time. If you ask some
What
people,
according to you is the prime difference between aggression and being assertive?
I think when you become assertive, you are aware of the situation and you know what you want, so you assert that. When you're aggressive, you only think of yourself. You don't think of the ecosystem.
Amit, for as long as I have known you, and as I said, my first interaction with you was, if my memory supports me, we were a part of some conference, and then you went through different programs that we do. I've always found you very polite. What made that shift for you from being aggressive to being assertive and polite?
So I was always a very well-behaved kid. My parents would vouch for it. I was always very well-behaved kid. I wouldn't even pick up a biscuit if he went to an uncle's house till my mother nodded and said, "You can." Right. So let me get you there on that. Right. But I think I've always believed that being polite was always there. Yes, I focused and I worked on it a lot more when I started to grow up and you start to have your experiences and you learn. But I've never been rude. I've never been uncouth with anybody, right? There are times when you lose it in life. Those are far and few. But otherwise, I've always been polite. So I think that just comes to me naturally. And I think with experience, you also realize that, I'm much more politer today, Gaurav, than when you met me. So if you thought that was polite, I'm much more politer today. If you told me, elephants can fly, I just politely smile and say, yeah, maybe.
Is it because you're indifferent to me?
No, it's not because I'm indifferent to you. It's because I will judge it and say, is it worth picking up? Is it an issue worth picking up?
Yeah.
I think over age I've wizened and like this I've realized which battles to pick up, which to let go.
Yeah.
And I think parenting does that to you a lot.
Tell me more about that.
So when you become a parent, right, you have a child, right? Now the child it's your child. So, but the child has his or her own individuality. Right. And the child is also finding that space to assert that individuality as the child is growing up. And sometimes, you have to be very, very cautious about how much independence you give to the child for that personality to flower, and how you put the guardrails and say, within these guardrails, I will let you flower, but these guardrails are a no, because if you break these guardrails early in your life, you will suffer later on. So that's when you start to realize that, okay, what battles will you pick up with your child? See, you can't always be on an offensive with the child. You can't keep telling the child that you're wrong. Some things child has to experience. I think that's where you start to learn. So I think parenting has matured me a lot, both being married and being a parent. And that has, let me choose what battles I want. What issues do I want to pick up? What I just want to let go.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, would it be a fair equation to pick up here? That being wise is equal to knowing which battles to pick up, that's one, plus accepting others' individuality.
Yeah, I think I agree. Absolutely. I think one always is accepting, you are far more accepting, but I think that some people just get to know, like I have had friends who very early in their age or career knew which battles to pick up, which didn't. It took me some time to get there, but I'm happy I got there, and it's my journey.
You're so focused, you're so clear about what you want to do, what you don't want to do, how many books you would be reading in a year. Every year, I wait for your LinkedIn post where you talk about that these were my favorite 10 books. These were my favorite 20 books. And you make time to write reviews about books. You make sure that you invest time on your health. You make sure that you make time for your relationships. We make sure that we catch up for a cup of coffee, if not every month, every alternative month. How have you been able to bring this kind of focus in your life?
So I had a coach, and actually she helped me uh, see this side of me that I needed to. I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it enough.
Okay.
And I think, see, it's what I call it personally is seamless compartmentalization.
Seamless compartmentalization. Okay, tell me more about this.
So that's what I do. I'm very miser with my time. So I need to be very clear what I'm going to spend it on and how I'm going to spend it on. Yeah, there are days when I just relax and I don't do anything, but typically I'm very miser. That's also very conscious that I've decided I won't do anything and I'll just let that Sunday go by. Right.
I'm sure that when was the last time that happened?
Oh, that happens very frequently.
Really?
Right. Yeah. But that's the day that I only see Netflix and I read or I see some OTT. I've always differentiated my week between Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday. That's my first compartmentalization. Monday to Friday is my time that, then I would look at saying what I want to do, what I want to achieve work-wise, personally, reading, writing, what I want to do, who I want to meet, where do I want to meet, how do I do it. So that's how I've compartmentalized it. I focused, what do I want to achieve? And then I try and be in that moment. So I practice being present a lot. Right. If I'm doing something, right, and I try to avoid the distractions at that time. I try and being present. If I'm in a meeting, like I don't do meetings which are more than 30 minutes. I've told my, my assistant who helps me that I don't want meetings more than 30 minutes. Because I can focus on that 30 minutes without distraction. And I feel we get a lot more outcome. And if we need, we can meet again. Right? We can meet later in the evening. I have my own times. Like I would typically before COVID, now after COVID it's become very hybrid. Before COVID, I would keep 5 to 6 as my time in the office. I would not give that time to anybody. Because that was my time to either reflect on how my day went and prepare for the next day, or to do stuff that I wanted to do and focus on time, which I didn't get through meetings, answer emails, prioritize. That was my time to use. And I used it differently almost every day, but that was my time to use. And then at 6 o'clock, I'd pack my bags and say, okay, now I'm ready to go. Someday I leave at 6:15, someday I'd leave at 6:30. And I think when you say focus, you have to say no to a lot of things for you to say yes.
You have to say no to few things to say yes to something.
Something. Right. You talked about me, focusing and eating meals. For 47 years of my life, I struggled with this whole doing exercise in the morning. Right. I was never I'm not a morning person. Everyone in my family knows. I can't get up at 5:30 and go for a run or a jog. Just doesn't work for me. And I struggled. I tried going to the gym. It didn't work out. I tried running in the morning, walking, music. It didn't work out. Then I realized maybe that's not me. So I shifted and I said, okay, 9 to 10 is my time to do my walk in the evening, physical exercise. That's what I want to do. I want to do that. So to do that, I had to say no to dinner at 8:30. I had to say yes to dinner at 7:30 because if I eat at 7:30, then I can go for a walk at 9.
Now, the next question that I have is, and I would respect for any response that you may have. In case you're not comfortable responding to that question, you can say yes or no, and then we'll move on. Would that be okay if I can ask this question, right?
Sure.
Amit, let's say that today is the last day on earth for us. And this is the last conversation we are having. Is there anything that you'll be going to grave with without letting anybody know in the world?
Yeah. I think Amit has his own insecurities like everyone else has.
Like?
Amit has his own pains like everyone else has. Right? Amit has his own to-do list that needs to be achieved. Right? That everyone has. And, if today was the last day and this was my last conversation and I was to go to grave after this, I think I take a lot of desires. I take a lot of unfulfilled promises. I would take a lot of, on the other side, I would take a lot of happiness. I would take a lot of achievements.
So
I would take a lot of
emotions
love
like
with me.
embarrassment, shame, regret, guilt. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I think everyone does that. Okay. We've talked about being vulnerable a lot.
So let me ask you this question. I remember one of our conversations, Amit, that was, if my memory supports me, you were supposed to go to London for some preparation.
I was supposed to address the Global Diversity Council, which was having their meeting in our global
And
headquarters.
I remember you said, Gaurav, now I need to go back. And we were 35 minutes in the conversation. And you said, Gaurav, I need to go back. I'll get back to you. Let's catch up once I'm back from London. So I was very curious. So what is this all about? You had notes with you. You were preparing something. You were talking to somebody for getting the PPT in place. And you said, I'm preparing for a talk that I have to deliver in London, which was like almost like 25 days. I personally believe that we learn something once we have understood the importance of that. And I've always seen you so particular about your preparation. What was that moment when you realized that it's very important to prepare, failing which might create situations that you might not be comfortable with?
So, in our family, the joke is that we are all very confident public speakers, right? My father himself is. So he's a very good speaker. And I think it's what I've got from him. So I've inherited my ability to speak publicly from him. So, my son has it. So I think it just runs. And, I was always confident of going and speaking at a stage, whether it's 100 people or 1,000 people. You have butterflies in stomach. I'm not saying that you have butterflies, but you were always saying, okay, once I get there, an initial 30 seconds, 1 minute, I'll play along, right? So you do that, right? So there was this one presentation that was supposed to happen, and I had prepared it, and the HR director at that time did tell me that I think you should do some part of this presentation tomorrow. Right. So as I do it, I will hand over it. At some point, I will hand it over to you, and then you can take it up from there. It'll be a good experience for you to be able to do it. And this is what I was, 1.5 years, 2 years into my career. So I was like, I had a night to think about it. And I was like, what I did? I just went home. I looked at the slides and I said, yeah, I've made these slides. I can talk to them, talk about them in my sleep. And I just let it pass. So next day when it happened, and he very graciously, it was an hour-long presentation. So after 20 minutes, he very graciously said, I'll invite my colleague Amit to now come on and share, take it ahead and all. He could have done it far longer. And I went in, and that's, when I started to speak there, that's when the penny dropped for me. Was I was just reading the slides. And I was like, and I knew I had lost the audience. You can sense that. And I knew he was getting very fidgety, because there was a lot more behind those slides. So after 10, 12 minutes, he started to come in and add. But to be fair to him, and, a lot of gratitude that he didn't take over, but he started to add, right? And I knew within next 20 minutes, I was an embarrassment on that stage because I was just reading the slides when there was far more on those slides that should have been done. And we finished off, and and I was very quiet. And on the way back, he said, well done, first time. Everyone learns, and I'm sure you will also. And that's what he said. And I died after that sentence of embarrassment. I wish he would have shouted at me and said, you did, it didn't go. And it was a very important presentation. Any which ways. So yeah, can I share another one after this?
Absolutely.
And I did learn, but I didn't learn enough, because sometimes one failure is not enough for you to learn. So I'm not a Superman. I did learn, but I didn't learn enough. And 3 years later, I went for an exec presence learning program. They had asked as a prerequisite that you make a presentation on something and come, which is 5 slides or something to present. So I'd chosen a topic. You could choose a topic. So I chose a topic and I made a presentation and I went there. So when I went there, and there was this trainer who was there and he was judging, he said, who will present? And he said, I'll give you time to prepare. And I laughed and said, well, I made the presentation. What is there to prepare? I made the presentation. Every one of us made the presentation. So what is there to prepare?
I made the presentation. Who needs time for presentation?
Yeah, to prepare for the presentation. Right here, I made it. So I prepared the presentation. And then when he said, who will speak first? I said, I will speak. And he said, fine, go ahead. And of the 15 participants, I was ranked 14 when he gave the final marks. And that's when it hit me.
So what lesson you did not learn first time that you had to go through the same grill second time?
What I did not learn from the first time was that, you have to work at it till you are sure that that's the best that you can give.
Was that the first time that you experienced embarrassment?
No, one does experience embarrassment. You asked me saying which was one that still stays
That
with me.
stayed with you, yeah.
You embarrass yourself so many times. I've embarrassed myself, dropping a Coke on my tie in a big meeting, but that's okay. You embarrass yourself, but something that, it's a hurt that stays with you.
I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying.
Second time I was not hurt because I was 14th. I was hurt because I then realized I hadn't learned my lesson.
And life continues to put you in the similar situations unless we learn those lessons.
Yeah. But yeah, I also believe that, and then I saw a documentary on Netflix about American presidential candidates many years later. And it clearly tells you how they prepare and all. I think that was very good. So I always tell anyone who's wanting to, be there, that prepare. Let me now tell you the story of the other part that you don't know of that instance. The global head was visiting India, and that was the first time I was meeting her, and we had an interaction over 2 days, and she said, and at that time when she visited India and she said, we are having a diversity council at our office in February. This was early December, and she said, I think you must come and present about India as a diverse country.
Wow.
And that was a challenge. That wasn't, diversity in corporate or in my organization. It was India as a nation. And I said, yes, I will. When your super boss tells you to do something, you say yes, right? You say, yes, I'll do it. And then when I started to work 1 month before, just about time that you'd met, a little before that, I started to then focus on saying, I got the brief saying 20 minutes, cannot be 21, can be 19. Right, so 20 minutes of presentation, 15 minutes of question. It's a global thing. You had HR heads and diversity leaders of, I think, at least 35 to 40 top FTSE 100 companies there.
Wow.
Right, and and we were putting up, and people in the corporate headquarters at that time didn't know much of me. So I'm sure when she went back, they would have said, "Oh, but why did you tell him to do it? And who is he?" But yeah, so that's where it was, and and to then capsule India as a country and diversity in 20 minutes was the challenge. That's why you saw me preparing really hard at that time. But I'm very proud of it.
This is one lesson that I have not yet learned 100%.
Yeah,
I need to prepare.
We've had our discussions on this.
Right? And I believe that we all have our own rough edges. What's the rough edge that you know that you have not worked with on yourself yet?
That's a very interesting one. Oh, there are so many. I still lose it sometimes.
Like?
Oh yeah, I just lose it sometimes. I have a lot of control on my triggers, but like dishonesty, it's a trigger that all my self-control just goes away. Yeah. If you're dishonest or if you lie on my face and I know you're lying, I think, sometimes I manage, but it's a trigger that is there, which is still a rough edge. Or seeing someone else disrespected triggers me. If you disrespect me, I'll take it. But I can't see someone else being disrespected who should be respected. I typically don't like that. And that's an external trigger that happens to me.
Yeah.
Especially in gatherings in where people disrespect people. I just don't like it.
You're one of those very few people in the country that I know of. Very swiftly, they have changed careers. How do you continue to redefine yourself?
So first I do is I set goals for myself. So when I started my career, I had a goal that I will be the head of it. At that time, when I started in 99, head of HR was a very big thing.
Yeah.
And it took people their lives to become head of HRs, right? So I'd set up a goal saying I will set myself a goal, and I'd heard someone speak about goal setting when I was a student in an MBA college, and I picked that up and I let it be. So I set myself a goal on a piece of paper to say, this is my time period to be the head of HR. This is what it is, and I worked towards it. Right? God was kind. I got the opportunity.
And what do you mean by work towards it?
See, when you have a goal, every decision that you take from a career standpoint, I always asked myself saying, why am I doing this? So I started to ask why before why became fashionable. And will this action of mine take me closer or farther from my objective? And that objective could be anybody, right?
So any step which is not taking you closer to your goal will take you away from your goal.
Yes, will take me away from the goal. Or may not take me away from the goal, but will not move me forward.
Yeah.
So the steps or the moves or the things that happened in my career which were taking me away from the goal, I wanted to lessen their impact. And the things that were taking me closer to my goal, I wanted to enlarge their impact or, increase their impact. Whether it was jobs that I did, whether it was bosses that I had, whether it was roles that I played, whether it was organizations that I worked for, or it was in my personal life. Choices that you make. So, you keep that in mind and you work towards the goal. You say I will be there in X years. Whether you reach in X plus 1 or X minus 1, that's luck. That's a lot of things that play externally, but at least you are focused. So when I got the first goal and I told myself saying, okay, now the time that I put for this goal and for my next is, so I set myself a new goal and said in next 5 years, I should be doing something else other than this job or this role. And then I put myself another goal after 5 years. And, when I say there was an Amit 1.0, what you see is an Amit 2.0.
And this is what, 10.0?
No, this is 2.0.
2.0.
And
okay.
I'm already working towards an Amit 3.0, which I will, because if I have to, see, if that has to come in, I have to work today for that to manifest.
What is Amit 3.0?
Oh, you will get to know. We will do another podcast on that. I'm not revealing on this
Got
podcast.
it.
Coming back to you, I've not answered. When you said how do I shed that skin and how do I think it's about, I told you about how I do the goal setting. I didn't answer the other part of your question. I think it's also about me challenging myself, and I know people box you, but I don't like to be in a box. And that's also one of the triggers when people box me. And I don't like anybody to define my box. So I am the one who will break the box every time and figure out what it is, and that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me challenged. Some moves work, some don't work. It's okay. I think that's part of the journey.
What has remained constant in your life?
I think hard work. Irrespective of what I've done, I still work very hard. I think that's remained constant. Discipline has remained constant in my life, right? Me working towards me having a goal has remained.
You still have goals?
Yes, I still have goals. I have lots of goals that I want to still achieve, and I think respect for people. I think that's remained very, very constant in my life. And when I think a lot of people will say this, even though I don't say this, is my quest. You said curiosity, my quest for knowledge, that has always remained. I give this example, Gaurav, and I'll give it here. I say we all have a well inside us, right? When we are in an education institution or in college, we keep filling that well. So when you are a child, till you complete your education, you keep filling that well. And I've given this example many a times. But when we come into our second part of our life or the later part of our life, we start taking from that well, right? And we don't adequately put back in. And that is where, when it starts to go empty, that is where we have midlife. People have midlife crisis. They have this feeling of we don't know where we are going, or no, are we relevant or not, or I'm stuck somewhere. Because we have not invested in ourselves, or we've not put that, we've only taken away. So I think I keep making sure that my well is full. My well is full, so that whenever I need to pull something out, I pull that out.
So, one is you're talking about something that stayed with you. You spoke about your values, be it hard work, be it discipline, be it valuing people, standing for what is right, making goals. And you also spoke about that inside us, we have a well. Unless we keep pouring in and we keep taking out, we'll not be able to grow. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, correct.
Now, Amit, here, what I heard you talking about is the core values that you stayed true to. But at the same time, we also have certain assumptions that we live our life from. What is that one assumption that you lived your life from that served you for the longest period of time? And after a few years, after a few decades, those stopped to serve you and you had no choice but to change them. What was that assumption and how did you get out of that groove?
I don't know about life, but I can tell you about my education career, and it's not a positive one, but I had an assumption of myself that I was never good at maths. Right? And I did though I'm an engineer, right?
Even I'm an engineer,
Yeah,
and I know what you're talking about.
And I always pursued that subject saying I'm not good at it, right? And today I don't think so, and I think in in engineering you read maths for 2 years.
Yeah.
So till my 12th, I never gave it my all because I thought I was not good at it. So what was the point of doing it? I'm not good at it, right? And in engineering, that assumption stopped to serve because I don't know. All of a sudden, I got this thing that I can do this. It's good for me, and I fell in love. So when my engineering maths ended, I fell in love with maths.
Wow. Wow. And the reason being?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe my outlook changed. I can put a hand to this, but that's when I started to love maths, and then it went into economics and business and all of that.
You have held senior leadership positions. You've also interviewed people who get on to senior positions, C-suite positions, and lead organizations. What do you think? What differentiates one individual from another? That how come there are 10 people at the CXO -1 position and only one is going to take on the position of a CXO? What differentiates that one from those 10?
I don't have a right answer to that, honestly. It's a culmination of a lot of things,
Let's start from
See, someone can have a good day, someone can have a bad day at an interview.
That
just
could be one of
because
the reasons.
just because you didn't get the job, doesn't mean that you're
But
not
that's
a good
not in
candidate.
somebody's control.
That's not in. No.
What is it that, okay, let me put it this way. What is it that in somebody's control that differentiates one from the rest 9?
I think it depends on what you're looking for, Gaurav. For every role, I look at different things. But there are certain consistent things that you look at, You look at, like, there are a couple of things that I always look at. I look at, people on, how they articulate what they have achieved, right? How much true their CV is. That tells you a lot about the person. At least I would read a CV for 15 to 20 minutes focused before I interview a person, at least at a CXO level, if not more. And I would know of that CV, a lot of that CV I would know, and I would have my questions on that CV. So, there's no one question that I would go to, 5 set of questions. I have my 5 set of questions. But I really understand and see because the person has made an effort to share a CV with you. So I read that CV. I would spend 15, 20 minutes focused on that CV. I would make my own notes on that CV. I would go through it. Then I would go and then, you start to look at it. Sometimes, the most unexpected candidate is the one you come in. Also, I think, we give it we don't give it credit, and a lot of people will kill me for saying this on a podcast, but I think there's also a chemistry that works.
Yeah.
Right? We cannot negate that. That's the untangible or the unsaid.
Something that you cannot even put on paper.
Put a finger on, you put a paper on, right? And then how the person comes across. And then you look at, I think as an interviewer, what is important is you also keep your personal bias aside, which is very difficult, but you have to do it. You have to look at the role. You have to look at the organization. You have to look at the candidate and say, what is best for the role and the organization? You are not
What's
there
that
to...
sweet spot where the person would be able to serve the organization and the organization would be able to serve this candidate?
Yes. The other question that I always asked, even when I was the HR head, I would ask my business leaders and for critical roles, and I would ask myself when I was a business leader saying, what would this individual do after 18 to 24 months in my organization? The individual may not know it, but I would ask that question because, when an individual spends 2 years, the question individual will ask is, what next for me?
What next for me?
So what we as an organization, so are we thinking today that this individual can do? And sometimes I've made calls where I've said, fine, we know this candidate, we have nothing to offer after 24 months, but still the best candidate, let's give it a shot. Let's take it. What must? The candidate will leave after 2 years? We will see.
Okay.
But let's do that journey.
Who are those people? What are those situations that have helped you become the leader that you have become and operate from the philosophy that you operate from?
So I've always had mentors in my life. I've been very fortunate to have them, right? And I've never had one mentor. And I tell all youngsters not to have one mentor.
Not to have one mentor.
No, you should have more than one mentor.
Okay.
Because every individual brings a certain strength or a certain variety. See, you can't go to one person for everything. You have to
you might like somebody for one particular reason,
Yeah.
but for the other area, the person might not be
the best person to go and seek advice. So I've always had this bunch of 4 or 5 mentors that I've had. They know who they are, right? And I've always gone to them whenever I've found
That's a smart way
myself.
of saying they know who they are.
Yeah, they know who they are, and if they are listening, they will know who they are, right? I lost one of them in COVID. It's a very personal
sorry.
loss,
So
and
sorry.
but whenever I've found myself in a situation, in a dilemma, I've gone to them, and I've shared. So I've been very vulnerable, saying this is the reality, and so that you can get the best advice. And it's not always that I've followed the advice, right? They also know that, but it's always good to get an advice. Because in the end, the decisions are mine and the actions are mine. But why would we not want to listen to advice that comes in? Sometimes they reinforce what I've said. Sometimes, I've not agreed with what advice I got and said, no, but this doesn't go with me, or this is not what I want. And I've still gone and treaded because my path is my path.
So how do you deal with disagreements?
It's very easy to deal with disagreements. I've learned it over a period of time. That you have your point of view and I have my point of view,
And we can coexist.
we can coexist. Yes, why not? But let me tell you, it's not that easy. I will try my level best to convince you to come over to the other side.
Either you convince me or get convinced.
Yeah. So you can make the same effort. So either we both come on one side, or we are happy to be on two different sides of the line and still coexist and shake hands.
Yeah.
But I do make a lot of effort to get either which ways.
And the reason being?
It's always good to say agree to disagree, right? But when you agree to disagree, there is still something that keeps, for a want of a better word, that keeps irking.
Yeah.
Is unresolved. Sorry, more than it's something that is unresolved. And then you can't control how that unresolved will manifest itself in the relationship.
Yeah. Never heard it this way. Never.
Yeah.
I know the feeling of unresolved, but why it bothers me is now I can resonate with, because you never know how is it going to manifest in the years to come.
Yes.
Thank you, Amit. And from here, let's take another dive into the leader Amit is. Amit, you have invested so much on yourself, and you continue to attend different programs. You continue to invest on the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, your education. And you have gone through a program called Expanding Horizons from the University of Oxford. What did you learn from that program that you've been able to put it into practice at this phase of your career?
I think that I did that program a little earlier, but I'm so glad I did that. And I got that opportunity, and my organization gave me that opportunity. And I'll tell you why. 2 things happened. One, it gave me a coach. So I got a coach, and I realized the power of coaching. And then I became myself a certified coach. And as I call you, you are my guru in coaching. But I did that myself, right? And I embarked on that journey. And a lot of examples that I shared earlier are of self-reflection, and because of that whole change that individual brought. The second is that, there were very few HR people in that cohort. It was a business program, business cohort. It was not an HR program. And being a part of that program over 1 year, 4 quarters, you had to go to the university for a week and then learn. And at that time, you didn't have online and stuff, but it was good. And, in that cohort, I realized the difference between being a functional leader and an exec and an executive. And that is the learning that set up the stage for me to do whatever I did in my recent career.
And I'm not surprised that you continue to move and steer in different functions, and then moved on and became who you became. What's the difference between a functional leader and an executive?
A functional leader is a smart manager and a good coach. That's what makes you a good functional leader. When I mean a smart manager, you do all the right things, the right people.
Who has a very good understanding of the function.
He or smart
she
manager,
is a part
good
of.
coach. You develop your people, you develop your team. Right. I always say this. I'm very proud that I've given fraternity 7 HR heads.
Wow.
I've had the pleasure of working with them. So, I think I'm very proud of that achievement. If you were to ever ask me saying one thing that I'm very proud of, this will be in my top 3 as a professional. But an exec is a smart manager, a good coach, and then learns how to put the organization first. So when you sit at the top table, you are not looking at your domain. You are putting the organization first. You are building on for the organization. and then you know that your function will get built. And I think that's the difference that I learned from this program.
So
I had a seat on the table when I went there, so I was already at the top table. But that's where I became an exec.
What a beautiful distinction. A functional manager is somebody who's very good at his or her understanding of the function, is willing to invest on their people to get better at that function. An executive is somebody who's willing to look at the organization first and then the function. Is my understanding
Yeah,
right?
so both twos, so it's 2 and then +1, so all 3.
So all good functional managers may not be the executives, but all executives are good functional managers.
Mostly. That is why, you hear a lot of thing in corporate world going, this is a great leader, but that's it. Or this person has reached the level of, growth that we can give. But there are aspirations for people to do more, but you don't fulfill those aspirations.
And what do you think, what comes in the way for those good functional managers, good functional leaders to become executives?
I think it's just the awareness. I think everyone would want to do it if you are aware. I think it's the awareness. Again, the willingness to do that. See, it's very important to put your function willingness
Ahead of
to
everything.
Put your function behind and saying, no, we will do it. Because a lot of times when you come back to your teams and say, I've committed to do this, they will say, why? Why are we doing this? What is it? So, you have, I think it's a process. I think a lot of people try. I'm not saying people don't try. I think now people are becoming more aware. People try, but how successful they are depends on, each and everyone's.
You said this is one of the 3 top things that you are proud of, that you have given 6 HR heads to the industry, 7 HR heads. Okay. What are the other 2?
Oh, that's for it. You can't get all answers on one podcast.
The next one. Recently, you've written an article on creating a culture where multi-generational team members can come together, flourish together, and help the organization grow. Let's take the first step first. What do you mean by creating inclusive growth culture? And how does one do that?
See, I wrote this on my LinkedIn newsletter, and for all the listeners here, I do a newsletter every month. And if you've read it, then it's a repetition for you. If you've not, then I'll give you a snapshot. See, when you look at the organization today, right? Let's start with that. We still have the late baby boomers, not the baby boomers, but the late baby boomers, right? Who would have started their career with a typewriter and are today working on a computer, and that to a cordless mouse and a keyboard.
Yeah.
Look at the journey there. Then you have Gen X, then you have Gen Z, Y, then you have Gen Z, right? All of these are there, and all of these generations bring with it their own pluses and minuses. But, rather than focus on the differences, we need to focus on what we can learn from each other. What is it that we bring, right? And what is it that, and the organization needs all. The Gen Alpha is also knocking on the doors. In next 7 to 8 years, we will have Gen Alpha walking into our corporate offices, right? And if we are not able to understand Gen Z today, we're struggling. Then how will we assimilate Gen Alpha when they walk in? And as an organization, the role that the organization plays is to assimilate. See, it's like saying the differences exist, but how do we make that as a strength? How do we make sure that young Gen Z person teaches my Gen X or a baby boomer, the technology that is today, and how they learn from them, about organization, about history, about processes, and even in personal life and professional life. See,
Precisely.
today when you look at organizations, a lot of Gen X's are in leadership roles. Some Gen Ys are also there, but mostly if you look at it, 60 to 70% leadership roles are today Gen X. Then there is Gen Y, and then gradually Gen Y will take over and Gen Z will start to come in, which will happen depending on the organization. That passing of the baton is already happening. But how well do you pass on the baton? How do you build that? See, people tell me, reverse mentoring, all of that stuff is there, which is very good, right? But, I think those whole models need to change. We need to look at saying how we can collectively come together. Right. I think it's mutual mentoring that is more important than reverse mentoring or mentoring.
Yeah.
And I say this in my article. It's mutual mentoring. Let 2 people come together, mentor each
And
other.
learn from each other.
And learn from each other.
Yeah.
And see, as I always say, and I think a corporate get-together is the best place to see this happen. Outside of work, when you party, you will see...
All are together.
you will see the same people having a single malt with the with some people, and having shots with the youngsters,
Yeah.
or on the dance floor, right from cha-cha-cha of the 60s to the Swifties. Everything is played and everyone grooves on it. Now, if you know what a Swiftie, but that's how it is, right? So if we can assimilate on a dance floor and in a bar and in a party, why can't we take that assimilation at our workplace and in the work model and do that?
Yeah. Amit, why are you even talking about this? Wasn't it there 10, 15, 20 years back? I mean, it has always happened, right? That people work with the next generation, always. Why are you even talking about that? When people talk about diversity and inclusion, when people talk about different concepts in the DI container, why is that a question? I remember 2016 is when we curated one conference. And the theme was, there's nothing called women leadership. There's nothing called women leadership. Leadership is leadership. Why are we talking about something that has to be so transparent?
So I'll give you my take,
Yeah.
and why I wrote this. I think the differences are becoming more stark than the similarities. See, when I started my career, we had baby boomers at that time. I was Gen X, right? I think I'm Gen Z in my mind, but I'm still Gen X by the definition. The things that were similar were more than the differences. You would come into a workplace, you would work hard, you would get married, you would have kids, you would build a career. Yeah, you could get in my time, the difference was I got a mobile when I was 3 months into the job, and I had colleagues who were 30 years into the job and didn't think they need to have a handphone in 99, right? So that was a stark difference. But today, the differences, the life choices have become. So, when someone in the workplace says, when are you going to get married? People feel offended by that question, right? Or I have more gray hair on my head than you have, or something. Those are, in my time also we heard that. I had someone who, I was asking to go in an organization, told me, son, I have put in more years in this company than your age. But I took it. But today, those things, they aren't taken anymore, right? People say, I will value you for what you bring to the table, what you give to me, what I give to you, what you collaborate. It's my choice, You can't ask someone who's got married today in the workplace and say, when are you going to have your kid? That was an okay question to ask 20 years back. It's not an okay question to ask now.
Yeah.
I think the differences are becoming, so how we approach work, right? I worked in places where you couldn't leave before your boss left the office, right? I also worked in places where my boss didn't bother. Today, my boss doesn't bother whether I go to the office or not, where I work from. As long as his work gets done, he sits in another city, I sit in another city, in different countries. So, that whole approach to work has changed. Work at our time was means to an end, right? Today, the end has changed. Work is only the means to achieve that end. And my end is not working.
I really love it when you said that the differences have just widened and there are less similarities. And that's where unless we build awareness for people that it's okay to accept people the way they are, we'll not be able to create more similarities and enjoy life. Amit, thank you so much. I think I could not have asked anything more from you. And the generosity with which you shared everything. And of course, there are a couple of questions that you have left me with that I'll be asking you when you hit the next goal and when we'll have you again on this podcast. So thank you so much, my friend. Thank you so much for being so generous and kind in your sharing always.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I think I share more than what I plan to come and share in your podcast, and that's your magic. But yes, I've still left some hook for you to call me again.
Yes.
And thank you for your listeners who've given me this much of time, and thank you for having me once again. So
thank you. What a learning. Let's try and revisit. What did I learn? He spoke about well, that we all have a well within ourselves, and it's very important to continue to pour into this so that we are always redefining ourselves. He spoke about that instead of focusing on the differences, we need to learn how to celebrate those differences. And the third one, do you remember from cha-cha-cha to Swiftie? What are your key takeaways? Do take some time to rate and review this podcast, and do share that with someone you believe would get benefited from this conversation. At the same time, do follow us on Apple and Spotify, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I look forward to meeting you next week with yet another interesting conversation. Till then, take care, stay blessed.